us off at number 10 is Okiku's doll. In 1918, a young man was visiting a nearby city in Japan where he came across a doll that he decided to bring home to his younger sister, Okiku. The young girl was so excited, she quickly fell in love with the doll and played with it every day. But tragically, a year later, she became very ill and died after a very intense fever. Knowing how important the doll had been to the girl, the family decided to place it in a household altar and began praying to it every day. After only a few days, the doll living at the altar, they noticed that the hair on its head began starting to grow. How is that even possible, they thought? Eventually, the family all came to believe that the spirit of Okiku had taken refuge inside the doll. Then, in 1938, the family decided to place the doll in the care of Menenji Temple, and to this day, it's said that the hair on the doll keeps growing. Allegedly, once it reaches the doll's knees, it's cut short, and every time it grows back. A sample of the hair was even sent to be analyzed, and it came back positive as human hair. I mean, I just can't. It might not be the scariest doll on the list, but it is still haunted, and that is creepy enough for me. Coming in at number 9 is a cursed Elmo. In 2008, a young boy received an Elmo Knows Your Name doll as a gift from his mom. Great start already, wouldn't you say? Well, not only did Elmo know this kid's name, James, but apparently it verbally threatened him and repeatedly sang the phrase "kill James" over and over and over. Now, the thing about this doll is that it's supposed to have to be programmed to say and repeat phrases, but of course no one in his family programmed that into the doll. It seemed to be doing it all on its own after the mother changed the batteries. The mother didn't notice until she heard the boy saying the phrase himself, seemingly parroting his doll, and of course she took it away immediately. Distraught, she called the manufacturer, and after the incident was investigated by Fisher-Price, the family received a voucher for a replacement. And I mean, just plain creepy. Next up at number 8 is Amelia the doll. Clearly I am out of the loop, but I had truly no idea just how many allegedly possessed dolls were being sold on eBay. This particularly terrifying toy was auctioned on the site and posted with a warning that read, "This doll is not recommended for the weak at heart, or for any little ones to have in their bedrooms." I mean, doesn't that just sound like the perfect addition to your home? The original owner of the terrifying demon doll claimed that Amelia's eyes used to be blue, but they had turned an unsettling shade of green over time. And apparently, it wasn't until after her eyes changed color that things started to get weird. Eventually, it was purchased by a paranormal enthusiast, and even he began to be creeped out by the thing. He recounts that he would hear juvenile laughter from the room she was kept in, and that on several occasions he saw her waving. But all of that pales in comparison to the day he found her standing alone in the hallway, as if she had been waiting for him to come home. Now, maybe it's just me, but I would have moved cities if I came home to a doll standing in my hallway. Next up at number 7 is Joliet doll. If there is one thing that horror movies have taught me, it's don't accept unsolicited gifts from someone who you know is angry at you. You never know what it could be hiding. In the case of a woman named Anna, it was a demon doll. Apparently the doll has been passed down 4 generations, but was originally gifted to her great-grandmother by a jealous and bitter friend. It's believed the so-called friend placed an evil curse on the toy that saw the great-grandmother give birth to a girl and a boy. But mysteriously, just 3 days later, the boy passed away. At first it was believed to be a tragic accident, but after the same fate fell on each woman in the family for the next 3 generations, it didn't seem like such a coincidence anymore. The family says at night they can hear the crying and laughter of young voices coming from the doll, and they believe that the doll acts as a vessel for the spirits of the lost sons. And I mean, if that is true, I mean, just how awful of a person do you have to be to place this kind of curse on someone? Like, actually, what is wrong with you? Coming in at number 6 is eBay voodoo doll. Listen, why anyone would buy a doll that was advertised as being haunted is beyond me, but I guess there are some people who live for the thrill of potentially being attacked by a demon, and who am I to judge? The eBay listing in question advertised a terrifying voodoo doll that was bound and chained inside a metal box with explicit instructions to never remove it, otherwise you would release its evil powers. Now, I get it. So much is fake on the internet, and maybe she thought it was a hoax, but I mean, why? why even take the chance? Still, she paid no attention to the instructions and removed the doll as soon as it arrived. It didn't take long before strange things were happening in her house. She began hearing loud tapping noises in every room and would have vivid nightmares that always ended in her being woken up abruptly after finding the doll in a place she had never left it. One morning, she even woke up covered in scratches. Eventually, she got so afraid that she decided to send the doll back to the seller just to get it out of her house. But to her horror, the package was returned with a note that said resident deceased. I mean, that is more than just a creepy coincidence if you ask me. Coming in at number 5 is a blindfolded doll. In June of 2014, a creepy doll was found on the side of a busy road in Singapore. The doll was left under a tree, blindfolded by a piece of cloth that was covered in Arabic writing Bismillah, meaning in the name of Allah. I mean, isn't that just a recipe for disaster? After the doll's discovery, a mysterious post appeared on Reddit. It claimed that the doll was known to be possessed by an evil entity and that it could walk and even talk on its own. Apparently, the original owner was so afraid that the doll was going to kill her or hunt her down if she tried to give it away that she decided to blindfold it to make sure it couldn't see where she went after she left it abandoned. And for good measure, she wrote the Arabic phrase in hopes that it would keep the evil curse trapped within. According to witnesses who found the doll on the road, it mysteriously vanished not long after it was found, and many believe that the curse was passed on to someone who found it and unknowingly removed the curse-trapping blindfold. At the moment, no one actually knows where this cursed doll is, but it's widely believed that it will return to the same roadside once it is done with its current victim. In at number 4 is Robert the doll. In 1904, a boy named Robert Eugene received a doll as a present from his grandfather. Robert was so excited about the gift that he even named the doll after himself. Almost immediately, his parents felt like something wasn't right. They claimed they would hear Robert speaking to his doll at night and that a strange voice would answer back. As time went on, Robert got more and more attached, and his parents began noticing that his behavior was changing for the worse. When they would notice something strange, like furniture in different rooms or objects scattered around the house, Robert would get extremely defensive and blame everything on the doll. Why the parents didn't just get rid of it at this point, I have no idea. Things only got creepier as Robert got older. He kept the doll even as an adult, bringing it with him to his new home with his wife. At least by now, he had the sense to leave it in the attic. But still, neighbors that walked past said the doll was always looking out the window and would watch as you walked by, often changing his expression as if he was taunting you. Years later, when Robert and his wife died, the new owner found the doll in the attic and said that every night they could hear eerie giggling coming from above. Thankfully, today it's locked behind a glass in a museum, but nonetheless, you will never catch me visiting. In at number 3 is Charlie. First discovered in the attic of an old Victorian home in 1968, upstate New York, the cursed Charlie doll was found locked away inside a trunk along with newspapers dating back to the 30s and a stained piece of paper that had the Lord's Prayer written on it. Now listen. This feels like when you're watching a horror movie and the walls start bleeding or something and the family goes, oh, that's weird. Better unpack. Like, why would you take this creepy old doll from a locked trunk with a prayer written on him and think, better put this on display in the living room? Well, whatever their reasoning, that's exactly what they did. And soon they started to get creeped out when they found the doll was moving places all on its own. Not long after that, the youngest daughter in the house came forward saying that Charlie had spoken to her in the middle of the night. The parents dismissed it at first, thinking she was just making it up, but noticed that each of their young family members was becoming increasingly afraid with each passing day. The final straw was when the young girl was found covered in strange, inexplicable scratches from head to toe, and thankfully at this point they decided to lock back up the demon doll. Today, Charlie apparently resides in a local oddities shop in Massachusetts, and you can go pay him a visit if you dare. Coming in at number 2 is Peggy. I can only imagine how many people try to play tricks on paranormal investigators. Truly, I'm sure that they receive countless fake cursed objects from people just trying to freak them out or annoy them in some way. But when Jane Harris, who apparently specializes in haunted dolls, received a package in the mail, it did not take her any time to figure out that this one was real. Inside the package was a blonde-haired doll with a note explaining that her name was Peggy and that she was haunted. Apparently, the woman who mailed it had tried seeking a priest to exorcise the doll, but it was unsuccessful and the woman no longer wanted her in her house as she was starting to fear for her life. Jane began an investigation immediately, posting numerous photos online for feedback. Not a day later, she had 80 emails claiming that the photos of Peggy had made them nauseous or given them intense migraines. Then she got the most frightening message of all. Apparently, one woman suffered a heart attack after looking at the photo, and while she survived, I mean, a heart attack from a photo of a doll is just straight up terrifying. After just 4 days in her custody, Jane began feeling Peggy's wrath and suddenly became very ill. But when a friend took the doll away, Jane's health improved immediately. Peggy does not like anyone to know much about her, but she is known to invade people's dreams and give them haunting news. One woman said Peggy came to her in a dream telling her to watch out for her cat. The next morning, her cat was dead. After a while, the spirit that was trapped in this doll made life very difficult, and so Jane eventually gave it to a museum. Peggy is now locked away under constant supervision and actually requires a waiver before you can see her face to face. And last up in our number 1 spot is Annabelle. Now listen, you didn't really think I was gonna do a top 10 list of cursed dolls and leave out our dear and precious Annabelle, did you? As you may or may not know, Annabelle was gifted to a nursing student named Donna back in 1970 by her mom. But mere days after receiving the doll, Donna and her roommate Angie knew that something was wrong. After about a month, the roommates began finding disturbing messages lying around their apartment warning them to help Lou. Lou was one of their friends who had apparently warned the girls of the doll since day 1. Eventually things got so creepy that the women contacted a medium who told them not to be afraid, that the doll was merely possessed by a young girl named Annabelle Higgins, who had died on the property years prior. The medium advised them that Annabelle felt safe here and would like to stay. The women agreed, but that was all part of the demon's plan. Not long after, Lou stayed over, and when he awoke from a nightmare, he found he couldn't move his body. And then, like straight out of a horror movie, he says Annabelle walked up his body and strangled him until he passed out. He told his friends what happened and they freaked out. They contacted a priest who put them in touch with paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. They discredited the medium and said it was in fact a very dangerous demon possessing the doll, and that it had tricked the medium to convince them to let it stay in the house. Thankfully, nowadays the demon doll is locked up tight in a glass case inside their occult museum, but even so, do not cross it. It was reported one man who visited the museum mocked the doll and only a few days later died after losing control of his motorbike.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Charlie. Charlie's story starts back in 1968 when they were found in the attic of an old Victorian home that resides in upstate New York. An old attic of a Victorian home seems like a perfect place to find a cursed doll, and it definitely seems as though that's what happened. Charlie was found inside of a locked trunk, and inside of that trunk, aside from the doll, there were also some newspapers dating back to the 30s, as well as a yellowed piece of paper that had the Lord's Prayer scribbled on it. With all that I've learned about cursed items in my time here on Most Amazing, I personally would have locked the trunk back up and called Ed and Lorraine Warren, but this family, they did not do that. They did quite the opposite. Instead, they placed the doll on display with some of the others that they had, and this is where the trouble began. Soon, Charlie started moving, all on their own. The family would return to find that the doll had somehow swapped places with some of the other dolls around. Shortly after this, one member of the family began to claim that they could hear Charlie speaking to them at night. The parents, unfortunately, didn't listen and chalked this story up to an active imagination, but the other members of the family were terrified of Charlie and refused to go near. Soon, things would take an escalation when a family member began to find mysterious and serious scratches on their body, and this is when the family collectively decided that something needed to be done. They locked Charlie back up in the trunk, and now Charlie resides at the local Artisan, which is said to be an oddity shop that sits in Beverly, Massachusetts, just minutes away from the haunting town of Salem. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Shrine Barbie. Barbie isn't always sunshines and smiles. Sometimes apparently there might be something more sinister going on. On a Singaporean island, there is a shrine dedicated to someone who passed away after falling from a cliff in 1914. It is said that the person who passed was a German, and at the time of their passing, they were stuck on this island when their family began being investigated by the British Army. Despite the years it's been since her death, this Barbie was actually only placed at the shrine in 2007. This all happened because a local man claimed that the German girl had requested the doll to be placed at the shrine after appearing to him in a dream for 3 nights in a row. It is this story that has people believing that this doll might have a lot more going on than what meets the eye. In our number 8 spot today, we have Lily. Lily was initially delivered to a paranormal research organization with a note from the owner that read, quote, "I found her outside my door one morning with a note that said to not put her by mirrors or in the same room I sleep in. I gave her a flashlight so she could drain the batteries, but instead she made my lights flicker at night. My cat would not go near her and my dog would just stare. At times I would be woken up from a dead sleep smelling burnt toast or sometimes a sweet fruity smell. Her favorite color is red. That is all I know." Okay. That's terrifying, but it seems like the doll was in the right spot. The doll quickly started to give off major paranormal vibes. As it turns out, this group was able to trace back some of the origins of Lily, and it totally makes sense as to why she would be a haunted doll. Apparently she can be traced back all the way to the early 1600s, which is a time when figurines like Lily were left out to scare off local spirits and New World ghosts. This custom can be dated all the way back to Vikings and ancient Rome, and it seems as though Lily and her powers didn't just work, but maybe caught some kind of entity on the way. In our number 7 spot today, we have Annabelle. Alright, what is a list of haunted dolls without the haunted doll, Annabelle? It's not just a movie, there really is a very real doll that the tales have been inspired by. The doll now resides inside of the Warrens Occult Museum, where it absolutely belongs, but where did it come from? Well, there was a college student named Donna who received this doll as a gift from her mother, who had purchased it from an antique store. Donna and her roommate started to notice some pretty creepy things happening and swore that the doll was moving. They said it would appear in different places and positions throughout their apartment before things began to get worse. Donna began to find notes that said help in her apartment, and one night found the doll in a different position and covered in some sort of red substance. The girls then decided to contact a medium who solidified all of their beliefs and told them that the doll had been possessed by the spirit of someone who was killed in their apartment building. For some reason, the girls didn't immediately get rid of the doll, and the story goes that their friend Lou, who was at the girls' apartment, heard a strange noise one night and went to investigate, and he was then attacked and killed by Annabelle. The girls finally contacted a priest who told them that the doll was possessed by a demon straight from hell, and then put them in contact with, you guessed it, Ed and Lorraine, who are the paranormal investigators. They tried to do an exorcism on the doll, but it apparently failed, which is why it now is kept in a glass box at their museum. In our number 6 spot today, we have Ruby. Ruby, like many of these other cursed dolls, just couldn't seem to sit still. This doll always found itself moving around the house, and the owners would find her in different rooms than they had left her, which definitely is what led to them catching on to her haunted nature. This was only exacerbated by the fact that anyone who picked Ruby up was suddenly plagued by feelings of extreme sadness as well as nausea. After a little digging, the family was able to find that Ruby had quite a dark history that might help to explain these strange happenings. According to the former owners of Ruby, she was actually passed down in the family from generation to generation. Apparently though, when you trace back to the time that the doll entered the family in the first place, shortly after a member of the family passed away while holding the doll, and now it is believed that their spirit resides inside. Of course, the haunted doll spent a few years bouncing around between family members, but now it has found its home base, and that is in the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and the Occult. Those who have seen the doll in person person have reported that around it, they've often felt an overwhelming feeling of sorrow, and it is all said to be coming straight from the doll. In our number 5 spot today, we have Okiku. Visitors to a specific temple in Hokkaido, Japan are welcome to gaze and look at Okiku, but any photography is strictly prohibited. Legend goes that this doll was originally purchased in 1918 by a man who was giving it to his sister. When the doll was first purchased, it had short hair. Seems like a bit of a mundane point, but I swear it's important. Sadly, a year after receiving the doll, the sister would tragically pass away, and mysteriously after this, Okiku the doll's hair would seem to grow, which of course should be impossible. The family ended up moving away in 1938, and before doing so, they gave the doll to the monks at the temple. Since then, it is said that the doll's hair has been continuously growing and now sits at a length to her knees. Some even claim that close inspection of the doll's mouth shows teeth that appear to be erupting from the gums. Whatever is happening here, it definitely isn't normal. In our number 4 spot today, we have Robert the Doll. Robert the Doll was a childhood birthday gift from a grandfather to his grandson, who was also named Robert, but more often went by Gene. The story claims that while growing up with Robert, Gene would often be heard by his parents in his bedroom having conversations with himself in 2 entirely different voices. His parents would sometimes be woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of Gene screaming, only to find him completely frightened in bed with overturned furniture all around him. Gene would blame Robert for all of the strange happenings, and at the time, no one really believed him. Gene kept Robert into adulthood, and it became what people would describe as an unhealthy relationship. Apparently, Gene took Robert everywhere with him and spoke as if he was a living entity rather than a doll. Okay, so this story is already not great, but it gets worse. Gene lived in a house as an adult that was called the artist's house. Robert would be left in the upstairs window where children in the area reported seeing the doll disappear and reappear, and they all chose to stay clear of the house. After Gene passed away in 1974, a woman named Myrtle purchased the house, and apparently Robert as well. Visitors of the house could swear they could hear footsteps and giggling coming from the attic where Robert was, and some even claimed to see the doll's expression change if someone spoke poorly of Gene. Myrtle reported Robert moving around the house on his own, and after 20 years she decided that she had had enough and donated him to a museum. Robert still lives in the museum where he is safely locked up, but it is said that he still likes to place a little curse on those who take his photo without permission. The walls of the museum near Robert's glass case are riddled with notes from previous visitors and naysayers who are begging Robert for his forgiveness and asking him to remove any curse he had placed on them. In our number 3 spot today, we have Chuck Esme. Alright, it's my favorite on this list. I have talked about Chuck Esme before, and I swear I will every time I get a chance because I love this story. It's so funny and pretty terrifying as well. Twilight fans everywhere will remember the infamous character of Renesmee, the child of human Bella and vampire Edward, and we will also all remember the very questionable CGI that was used in the movies. I mean, how could we possibly forget it? But it turns out the CGI wasn't the only cursed part of Renesmee's character. For much of the movie filming, an animatronic doll was used in place of a real infant. This prop, however, is now being accused of being possessed by some malevolent spirit. The doll resides in the Forever Twilight display at the Chamber of Commerce in Forks, Washington, where the movie is set. According to those who work at the exhibit, as well as visitors, the doll is now referred to as Chuck Esme, a reference to the Chucky movies, because of the strange happenings around the Twilight prop. According to one of the people who works in the building, quote, "One day she might be standing up straight, and the next, when you come in on another day, she's in a weird position." She went on to say, quote, "It's like, is she moving around in there? We don't know. But we tell everyone that the display case cover is on her for their protection." In our number 2 spot today, we have the Island of the Dolls. The Island of the Dolls is basically exactly what it sounds like, and while it is exceptionally creepy to look at, the story behind it is even more disturbing. This island sits in the canals south of Mexico City, and it is the home of many, many absolutely frightening and mutilated dolls. Even in the daylight, these dolls look creepy with their missing limbs and heads and creepy beady eyes, but at nighttime, the island is absolute nightmare fuel. The story behind this island is quite tragic. It starts off with the only person on the island, Don Julian Santana, finding a body. He was of course absolutely beside himself over this gruesome discovery, and shortly after he saw a doll floating by in the water. He strung the doll up in a tree in order to appease her soul and to protect the island from evil. While this is an extremely dark story and the dolls are very creepy, the story only gets more eerie and more paranormal feeling. The island of dolls is of course only accessible by boat, but despite its isolation, many people come to visit the haunting island, and in return, there have been many reports of these tourists hearing some sort of whispering coming from the dolls. Tourists are also encouraged to bring and leave some sort of offering or another doll to add to the collection, so who knows what cursed items are being left behind in the hopes of these people ridding them from their own life. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Nightmare Doll. Haunted dolls like Annabelle and even Robert get a lot of hype, but they certainly aren't the only dolls with stories of curses and hauntings behind them. This Nightmare Doll was listed for sale on eBay, and according to the seller, the doll is possessed by a Divuk, which is a malicious demon or entity. The seller of the doll is actually someone who apparently specializes in selling these sorts of paranormal items that no one wants anymore. The seller explained that the owner of the doll bought it at an antique shop, and while they did tell her about what the doll held, she didn't know what the word meant, so she took it anyway. Soon after purchasing it, she realized that anyone who came into contact with the doll was then plagued with terrifying nightmares and occurrences of these sort of shadow people. She only could handle this all for a couple of months before she handed the doll over for it to be sold and moved far, far away from her.
A doll that changed into a horrifying ghoulish nightmare, almost as if it actually aged. A teddy bear that sent a man to the hospital, a lifelike mannequin that may be more than just an eerily realistic sculpture. These are cursed dolls that even Ed and Lorraine Warren would have been terrified of. This first story was making its rounds on the internet for a while, the doll that aged. So it all started with a regular baby girl doll that a young girl played with every day, but as time passed and the girl grew up, she played with the doll less and less, until eventually it was tucked away in the attic and forgotten about for over a decade. Sounds like the beginning of like Toy Story, but this is kind of like the horror version. So fast forward to when the parents decide to clear out the attic. They're looking for the old doll, but when they finally find it, they're completely shocked and horrified to find that the doll, which had been left untouched for years, now looked like this. Just kind of different from how they remembered it. I mean, in what world would anyone ever purchase something as horrific looking as that for their young daughter? Unless, you know, you're me, because that's a reaction I would just love to see on Christmas morning. The once sweet baby doll now had this ghoulish, shriveled appearance. I mean, it looks worse than the Crypt Keeper. Horrified, the parents quickly got rid of the doll. They didn't burn it in a fire like you'd probably expect though. Instead, they took the time to actually sell this monstrosity. And managed to. Next we have mourning dolls, and that's not like early mourning, I mean the death kind of mourning. Mourning dolls were a thing in the Victorian era, and back in those days life was incredibly tough, especially with the rampant diseases that led to high mortality rates a lot of the time in younger people. To cope with the loss of young loved ones, some families created these unique dolls known as Victorian mourning dolls. These were actually made for the parents, keepsakes designed to honor and remember their deceased daughters or sons. They were usually made from materials like wax or porcelain and dressed in black clothing to symbolize mourning and death. And even more depressing, they were handcrafted to look just like the youngsters who just croaked, with great attention to detail, and they'd usually put them on display where they used to play. Good lord. I get the idea of creating this tangible thing that's meant to keep their spirit alive, I guess, but man, that is morbid. To say that some of these things must have been cursed would be an understatement. Oh, mannequins, don't they just make you want to leave the store immediately? A lot of the time they're just faceless figures now, but they used to be a lot creepier when they were made to look more like people, with like eyes and noses and lips. Well, no mannequin hits that unsettling uncanny valley thing more than La Pascualita, an eerie mannequin that's become a must-see attraction in Mexico. This mannequin is known for its very lifelike appearance, and some people believe it might be more than just a display piece. The story goes that La Pascualita was modeled after the daughter of the bridal shop's original owner. She tragically died on her wedding day after being bitten by a poisonous insect. Heartbroken, the mother commissioned the mannequin in her likeness as a way to remember her. But there's always been this rumor or urban legend that La Pascualita isn't a mannequin at all, but a preserved corpse. Some claim they've seen her move or even heard her whisper. Plus, the thing is just so eerily lifelike, especially for a mannequin. I mean, just look at that hand. Ugh. This story went viral when a TikToker named Jessie V did a video on it, but the ordeal had actually been filmed for TV before that. So this is the story of Mr. Ted, a haunted teddy bear that sent a man to the hospital. Mr. Ted once belonged to a psychic medium named Debbie Davis who claimed that the bear had some unsettling vibes. According to her, Mr. Ted had been known to cause nausea in people and even make growling sounds. So, what do you do with a growling bear that makes you vomit? Well, you take it to a haunted castle, of course, because why not? Bolsover Castle is famous for being one of the most haunted castles in England. A team of 3 volunteers then agreed to spend the night in the castle with Mr. Ted just to see if there was any truth to the story. They set up their experiment with Mr. Ted sitting on a chair next to them as they tried to get some sleep. Paranormal expert Joe Lockwood was on hand, observing from a nearby room. While around 3 a.m., the team lost connection with a camera, and during this weird period, one of the producers working on the TV experiment suddenly fell ill and had to go to the hospital. After this, the bear was buried at a secret location about 30 miles from its owner's home in Manchester. Fingers crossed it doesn't crawl out of its grave to growl and upset any other innocent stomachs ever again. Okiku is a haunted doll from Japan with a really tragic backstory. In 1918, a young man named Daikichi Suzuki bought a doll for his young sister, Okiku. She fell in love with it right away and took it everywhere she went. But sadly, Okiku caught the yellow fever and died just a year later, still clutching the doll in her arms. Her family built an altar for her and placed the doll there to honor her memory. But people started noticing that the doll's hair, which had been neatly styled, seemed to grow. They saw split ends and longer strands, and along with this, the family experienced odd happenings in their home. There'd be flickering lights, loud bangs, and whispers, especially around significant dates, like Okiku's birthday, or the anniversary of her death. In 1938, the family moved, but decided to leave the doll behind, feeling it belonged near their daughter's resting place. They gave it to a local temple where it remains to this day, and yes, the hair supposedly continues to grow. Looking at this puppet, would you ever think twice about sleeping in the same room with it? It looks pretty innocuous, right? Well, according to paranormal investigator Jane Harris from Stourbridge, West Midlands, that wouldn't be advised. She'd acquired the doll from a guy named John who claimed that the wooden puppet tried to choke him in the middle of the night. So Harris decided to keep a camera on the thing throughout the night to try and see if it got up to any mischief. Well, one night, it did. On camera, she captured the string with the cross attached, which operates the puppet, slowly moving upright on its own before falling back down in the case. Harris stated, "I've never had anything as exciting as this. I've caught pictures of mists, orbs, and shadows, but nothing as physical as this video evidence." The previous owner, John, had grown up with the puppet, which belonged to his father. He said he never liked it either, that it always gave him the creeps, and that whenever friends came to visit, they'd never want to get near it. And then, of course, there's the choking incident. After John's father had died, he was clearing out his belongings, but ended up keeping the puppet, which he left on the drawer by his bed. And that very night, the incident occurred. He said, quote, "I was wide awake in bed and thought I saw a shadow move from one side of the window to the other, and worried something was trying to scare us. Then, without warning, my throat suddenly went really tight. I've never had anyone's hands around my throat before, so it was really scary. I tried to wake my wife, but it took her ages to come around. When she did, I remember looking straight at the puppet sitting on the drawer near our bed and realizing it was him." We've all heard of Robert the Doll. Well, how about a spooky first-hand account? This story comes from Reddit user Sublime Sloth, who posted this story along with a photo. They wrote, "Long story short, friend's sister went to the Robert the Doll exhibit in Key West and didn't believe the curse. Apparently flicked it off and took a photo without asking permission. Started having terrible luck. Photos messed up, eerie feelings of being watched, etc. This photo was taken after a conversation talking about how she felt that Robert was following her and had something to do with her string of bad luck. Someone jokingly took the photo after invoking Robert's name to see what would happen. 100% real and not photoshopped. She immediately wrote a letter apologizing to the doll the next day. Nightmare fuel. Had this photo for years and show it every time the topic of ghosts comes up. I don't know, what do you guys think of this one? Let me know in the comments. Did you get super sick of the movie Frozen 11 years back? God, that was over a decade ago. Well, at least you didn't have to go through what this next family did. In 2013, the Bedonia family in Houston brought an Elsa doll from the movie Frozen for their young daughter. Now, at first, everything was normal. The doll sang and said cute phrases from the movie just like it was supposed to, but then things started getting weird. According to Emily Bedonia, the doll started doing stuff like switching between English and Spanish, and for the next 6 years, the doll never once needed new batteries. Not that it even needed batteries at all, because apparently it would even say things when it was supposed to be off. So naturally the family decided they'd had enough of Elsa and her weird antics, so they decided to let it go. Good old 11-year-old joke. Anyway, they threw it in the trash, but none of this is the creepy part. A few weeks later, they found Elsa in their basement. They tried to get rid of it again, this time by putting it deep at the bottom of the trash bin right before the garbage was collected. Then they took a short trip out of town, thinking the doll was finally gone, but when they got back, Elsa was sitting in the backyard, like she'd never left. Now you'd think someone was just messing with them, but Emily pointed out that the doll had this distinctive mark from their daughter. The doll sitting in the backyard had that very same mark. This is Harold, full name Harold the Haunted Doll. And it's pretty easy to see why. I'd have some serious questions for whatever youngster would ever want to spend time playing with this thing. In 2003, a young man came across Harold at a flea market and felt this immediate urge to buy him for some reason. It was worn and shabby, but the man bargained with the seller and eventually paid $20 for it. But before he could leave, the old man selling the doll stopped him and insisted he hear the doll's eerie backstory. The man revealed that Harold was a gift he'd given to his own son, who tragically died shortly after receiving it. After his son's death, the old man kept Harold in his room, and that's when strange things began to happen. He would hear singing and laughter coming from the room when no one else was around. Frustrated and scared by the constant disturbances, the old man tried to burn the doll, but it wouldn't catch fire. The Redditor decided to take the doll home anyway, and things got weird almost immediately. He started experiencing severe migraines, something he had never dealt with before. And a couple days later, his cat died. He began hearing the same voices and laughter that the old man had described as well. But even with all this happening, he decided to keep Harold, but he stuffed him in a suitcase, out of sight, out of mind. And I guess he couldn't burn it, he already knew. But I would have definitely not kept it in a suitcase. I would have driven it out of town and left it in the woods. The Swamp Dolls. It sounds like a great name for a band, but you know, that's not where I'm going with this thing. So in 2014, police in Alabama stumble on a very odd scene in Bear Creek Swamp. They find 21 dolls, most of them antique porcelain, all stuck on bamboo stakes and standing upright in the middle of the swamp. The dolls were discovered on land owned by a timber company, but when the police tried to reach out to the company to get some answers, they never got a response. The police also tried to track down who put the dolls there, but they came up empty-handed. Now, this wouldn't be all that eerie if Bear Creek Swamp didn't already have somewhat of a spooky reputation. People who visit the swamp have reported hearing disembodied voices, seeing strange orbs, and even spotted unidentified creatures. There's also an old legend that says the swamp is haunted by a grieving mother who's endlessly searching for her lost daughter. But believe in ghosts or not, it's hard to deny that finding a bunch of old dolls on stakes in a swamp is kind of unsettling. I do have to wonder what's going on in that town though, because I feel like if I was a cop and I was called to a scene where there were dolls on stakes, I'd be like, I think there's something else probably better I could be doing with my time. Maybe that's just me though. Twilight franchise is full of awkward performances and poorly written dialogue, but the scariest thing to come out of it may be a doll that was used on set. In Breaking Dawn Part 2, Bella and Edward's daughter, Renesmee, was a doll. She wasn't supposed to be a doll in the story, they just decided it would be easiest to use a doll on set instead of a real human being, which I mean, sure, but easier doesn't always make something better. And in the case of this movie, the prop was downright nightmarish. If I had a daughter that came out looking like that, it wouldn't be good. Anyway, apparently this prop doll doesn't just look creepy, it is creepy. By that I mean the cast said they thought the thing was downright haunted and hated being around it. So much so that it was nicknamed Chucky Smee. It now sits in the Forever Twilight collection in Forks, Washington, which displays a whole bunch of props and wardrobe from the movies. Staff will say they see the doll moving around on her own, often being found in different positions in the glass case. Staff will see her standing up straight one day, only to come in the next day with her sitting or in some weird position.
Next on our list today we have the doll in a painting, the intersection where creepy artwork and cursed dolls meet. In 1972, with a rapidly approaching deadline, artist William Stoneham decided to use a poem that his wife had written him as the inspiration for his next painting, this painting, which he called The Hands Resist Him. It was a physical reminder of William's upbringing and his time spent with his adoptive parents. What he saw as beautiful seriously creeped out the public. The young man in the painting, representative of William, stands next to a dead-eyed doll, holding something that appears to have frayed wires coming out of the top. And in the windows behind the two, hands can be seen reaching out towards them, pressed against the glass. The painting was eventually sold to John Marley at an event attended by Henry Seldes and William Stoneham himself. All three men died shortly after. In 2000, the painting became popular once more when its owners listed it for sale on eBay, claiming that their daughter had seen the man and doll in the painting fight, and that at one point the family had even witnessed the man go missing from the painting after he climbed right off the canvas in the middle of the night. The family selling the painting was also looking for someone to bless their home after the piece was gone. I don't blame them, it's really creepy to look at.
In a museum in the town of Quesnel, British Columbia, there's a doll named Mandy that likes to follow people with her eyes, and these are not the kind of eyes you want to have following you around a room. Just take a look at this monstrosity. Yeah, keep it the hell away from me, please. Even without all the stories about it, I'd still be creeped out having this thing around. Mandy was gifted to the Quesnel Museum and Archives in 1991. The doll is now about a century old, and the donor had received it from her grandmother. It had been locked in a trunk for years, but when she took it out, she felt that something was just off about the doll. Wonder why. She decided to donate it to the museum. When Mandy arrived, the staff photographed her to add her to the collection and left her in the lab overnight. The next morning, they found the lab in complete disarray, as if someone had thrown a big temper tantrum. Another strange event occurred later when a stuffed lamb given to Mandy to keep her company was found outside of her locked case. Visitors also report odd experiences. One person from Calgary tried to videotape Mandy but couldn't get the camera to work, though it worked fine everywhere else in the museum. Another visitor from Surrey returned home to find her house had been broken into, with only one item missing, being a porcelain doll. A local reporter was developing photos of Mandy in the basement lab. He heard footsteps upstairs, and then his contact sheet jammed in the machine, something that had never happened to him before. And of course, a lot of museum visitors will swear that Mandy's eyes follow them as they move around.
Next up, we've got Harold, who was purchased by a young man attending a flea market in 2003. As soon as he spotted the doll, the young man knew he had to have it. He went back and forth with the old man selling it, but eventually the two settled on $20 for the dilapidated Harold. The young man began to walk away with his purchase, but the old man chased after him, insisting that the young man know the origins of the doll that was now in his possession. The old man told of how the doll, Harold, had been given to his own son as a gift, but that his son died shortly after. After his son's death, the old man kept Harold in his room, but whenever he walked by, he would hear the sounds of singing and laughter, even though there was no one there. Eventually, the old man became sick of the taunting and he tried to burn the doll, but Harold wasn't having it. He wouldn't burn. Despite the old man's warnings, the young man took the doll home. That night, he began having severe migraines, something he had never experienced in the past. And then, 2 days later, his cat died. After that, he began hearing voices and laughter, just as the old man claimed to have heard himself. Despite what the young man was experiencing, he couldn't give up that connection with Harold, and he decided to keep the doll, but he locked him away in a suitcase for safe measure, where he remains to this day, just waiting for the moment someone lets him out.
Next up, we have what is described as a possessed demon doll currently up for auction on eBay. And at the time of this video coming out, you only have till tomorrow to place your bids. So get on there and get your dollars in. The seller described how the doll, whose name is Valerie, has scratched her and her husband on more than one occasion. She says in the item description that she keeps her away and hidden in the water heater closet, and that if the doll is left out or if she dares to look into its eyes, there are consequences. Saying if you just glance at her vessel, some type of mark will show up on your body. The seller also notes that the doll will be bound and blindfolded when shipped out, which is for the seller's protection during packaging and for your protection as you open the package. So it sounds like an easy sell to me. Ditch the tickle me Elmo that you have to tickle and snag this possessed demon doll that will scratch you instead.
Next up, we have the Victorian doll, which was purchased alongside 2 others by Debbie and Cameron Merrick, and which was also featured on the This Morning show. You see, one day Debbie and Cameron made the decision to purchase 3 old Victorian dolls for the low price of just $5 and their sanity. Shortly after they purchased the dolls and moved them into their home, strange things started to happen. The fire alarm would go off constantly and continuously, despite no smoke or fire being present in the home, and Cameron began waking up with tiny scratches all over his legs. One day, one of the doll's necklaces disappeared, and Debbie and Cameron came to the conclusion that this doll must be possessed. After speaking about their experiences online, the pair, along with their possessed Victorian doll, were invited to the morning show. The couple spoke about their experiences since purchasing the doll when all of a sudden the rocking chair next to them, where the doll was sitting, began to move on live TV. After the incident, the pair were positive that the thing was possessed, and so they sold it to a paranormal investigator by the name of Lee Steer, who claims that shortly after purchasing the doll, the lights in his home began acting up, his paintings began swinging on their hooks, and strange scratches were appearing on his arm. He also claimed that at one point the doll possessed a random word app that shows the user words at random to tell Steer that her name was Samantha and that she hated men. Probably not the best thing to be keeping in a bachelor pad.
This story comes to us from Reddit user ApprehensiveCost806, who asked the fine people of Reddit to help them with a doll they believed might have been haunted. So they wrote, "I like to go charity shopping a lot. You can find amazing things there for even better prices. In my most recent shop, I found a really cute doll. I saw it and I knew I wanted it. It was so cute. For context, I've always been 50-50 when it comes to the supernatural, but since I've got this doll, I've noticed whistling from behind me whenever the doll has been in the same room. I play it off as someone outside whistling, but something else has happened. I was showering and usually leave the doors slightly open if I'm home alone, as my dogs always find some way to misbehave. This way I can keep a better eye on them. My dogs started barking uncontrollably, and I thought it was someone outside. I couldn't stop them from barking. I ended my shower to check the door. When I got out, I noticed my dog nervously barking at my bedroom door, where the doll is. I decided to go to my room and check it out. Usually my dogs willingly run into my room and get comfy on my bed or chew what they can find. They wouldn't. They both stood there barking. I'm well aware that animals are deemed to be more sensitive towards the supernatural, and I'm aware of my dog's behavior enough to know that this was unusual.
Next up, we've got Ruby, who currently travels with the Traveling Museum of Paranormal and Occult, but once lived with a young woman who long ago got very sick. The young woman loved Ruby. She was her most favorite possession, and so when the young woman died, Ruby was passed down through generations of the woman's family. Many family members who kept Ruby would put her in a box because they found the doll to be just a tad bit creepy. Those who decided to brave the Ruby storm and keep the doll out on a shelf or chair reported having often heard strange noises coming from the room in which the doll was being kept. Many have also said that they have heard Ruby walking around and also experienced nausea and headaches while in the doll's presence. Those who visit the doll at the museum today are drawn to Ruby, and almost half of the people who walk past her are compelled to take her in their arms and rock her back and forth as though they are trying to soothe her. When they are made aware of their actions, they're shocked, appearing as though they have no recollection of how the doll had gotten into their arms in the first place. Other visitors have gone home with photos of the doll on their phone, even though they swear they have no memory of taking any.
Alright, next up we have Violet the Haunted Doll, who was purchased by Reddit user Abandoned Explorer 21, who stumbled on the doll at a yard sale. The doll was offered for free with a note claiming it was haunted. The user asked the owner why she believed the doll was haunted. The owner said that she had bought the doll at a thrift store for her daughter, who named it Violet. Strange things began happening almost immediately though. The owner heard her daughter arguing with someone she claimed was Violet. One day while her daughter was out, the owner heard a girl's voice coming from the daughter's room. She found Violet in the center of the room and moved her to the bed. As she walked away though, she saw the fridge magnets had been arranged to spell hi. Then a music box in the living room started to play before she heard the door to her daughter's room slam on its own. So terrified, she waited outside until her husband returned, and when they re-entered the house, they saw Violet on the coffee table. The husband tossed Violet into the shed, where she stayed until the yard sale. So the Redditor decided to take Violet home. After all that, for almost a month, nothing unusual happened, but then one night the user felt someone sit down on the foot of the bed, but nobody was there. A few days later, while making a sandwich, the user heard a girl's voice whisper, "Hey." This was followed by giggling from the bedroom, where Violet had mysteriously moved to the bed. Now wanting to investigate, the Redditor bought an EMF detector and spirit box. The EMF detector showed high readings near Violet. And after 2 weeks of static on the spirit box, the user finally heard "hi" and "get the thing." Went back to the seller, asked him if there was anything that had been attached to the doll. The seller said maybe it was referencing the music box, and gave it to them. During a spirit box session, a girl's laugh and a man's voice saying "devil" ended up coming through. So now fearing, the whole devil thing, she ended up throwing Violet into the backyard, and the next day found that she had moved closer to the house. So finally the user put her in a storage unit, never taking her out again after that.
And finally, we have Letta. In 1972, a man named Kerry Walton was visiting his hometown in Australia for his grandfather's funeral and decided to check something off his bucket list. There was an old abandoned building in the town that for years he was too afraid to even go near, but on this visit, he felt compelled to finally face his fears and enter the home. While searching around the home, he found an old marionette doll underneath the porch, and he felt the urge to take it home with him. Feeling a strange energy coming from the doll, Walton decided to bring it to a psychic, where he learned of its origin. It had been made 200 years prior to Walton finding the doll by a Romanian woman for her son who had drowned. Oh, and it also housed his soul. The hair on the marionette's head was real, it was that of the boys, and underneath its removable scalp was the likeness of a human brain. After the visit to the psychic, Walton began hearing noises coming from the doll that he could faintly make out to be the screams of a young man saying, "Let me out." He named the doll Letta and brought it to his antique shop, but the doll was not for sale. Walton liked Letta a lot because he believed that the marionette was bringing him good fortune. But the doll was not without its quirks. Whenever Letta was taken outside, it would rain, and when Letta was brought into a room, pictures would fall off the walls. Dogs would also get aggressive while in the presence of the doll and try to attack those around them, and many people also reported feelings of inexplicable fear and sadness whenever they got close to it. Walton has also said that the doll will often change positions when left alone and emit a pulse when held, as though it is somehow still alive.
Starting us off at number 10 is Lily. One day, a group of paranormal researchers received a doll with a note attached to her saying, quote, "I found her outside my door one morning with a note that said to not put her in front of mirrors or in the same room I sleep in. I gave her a flashlight so she could drain the batteries, but instead she made my lights flicker at night. My cat would not go near her and my dog would just stare. At times I would be woken up from a dead sleep smelling burnt toast or sometimes a sweet fruity smell. Her favorite color is red. That is all I know. The researchers were very intrigued by the doll, and it didn't take long before Lily began acting strange around them too. And they knew that something was deeply wrong. But unlike what any sane person might do, like, I don't know, get rid of the evil and creepy doll, they decided to mass produce it using the original as a template. That's right, if you so choose, you can have your very own Lily doll delivered right to your door. I mean, I can't. According to the researchers, she is meant to ward off evil, so at least they had good intentions, or so they say. To me, it just feels like you're taunting the evil spirits to come your way, and I will not be partaking in any kind of hangout with this doll. Next up at number 9 is a doll's house. One of the last things I would ever want to live in my house would be a haunted evil doll. But apparently not everyone has the same dreams. In fact, for the Watkins family, one wasn't enough. Instead, they have opted for a whole horde of possessed dolls to share their home with. The couple are both paranormal investigators and have been collecting cursed dolls for years. In their collection is Crystal, True, Monica, Charla, Isaac, Lily, Ashley, and Cameron, all of which were individually bought and all of which were advertised as being haunted. The community of dolls resides in their home in Pennsylvania, and up until 2015, the investigators actually set up a 24-hour live stream so that all of the internet could sit back and watch their cursed magic happen. Over the years, many claim to have witnessed more than one unsettling sight, but most notably was the 2009 sighting of a ghostly apparition of what appeared to be a boy. Okay, so maybe it's not the scariest of the bunch, but it is still a room full of possessed dolls, so it's a no for me. Coming in at number 8 is Amelia. Maybe one of the oldest haunted dolls still in existence, Amelia has been giving people nightmares for over 100 years. Back in the 1800s, she was gifted to the King of Italy, and from what I've been able to find, she wasn't yet haunted when under possession of the king. When the king died, he passed on the doll to one of his closest and dearest friends, Ulvado Bellina, who tragically, however, was assassinated, and so the doll passed down to his daughter, Marie. But still, the doll remained as sweet and unhaunted as ever. That was, of course, until the World Wars. Although she managed to get through World War I relatively unscathed, as the story goes, in World War II, there was a huge explosion and a woman dove into the chaos to try and save the doll for young Marie. Sadly, the woman trying to help lost her life, and to this day, it's believed that her soul is the one that haunts the doll. Now missing both arms and a good portion of her scalp, it's said Amelia routinely opens and closes her eyes and is often heard crying out for her mother at night. What makes the last bit extra creepy is that the original voice box of the doll no longer works. In fact, it hasn't worked for years. But still, every night, her cries ring loud and clear for all to hear. Next up at number 7 is Amanda. Unlike many of the others on this list, Amanda is a bisque doll. What that means is that she's made of unglazed porcelain, and while in her time she may have been used as a toy, ultimately they have turned into collector's items for the affluent. Truthfully, Amanda's specific origin story is unknown. However, we do know that she first came into the limelight after being purchased off of good old eBay. The original purchaser of the evil doll didn't last long, as they said she brought bad luck into their lives. They sold it once more, and the next owner complained of the same issue. All in all, she has been sold and purchased 10 times, never lasting long in any of the homes she finds herself in. On top of bad luck, owners have complained that she moves around all on her own, often being found in places where there was no explanation for her being there. Creepiest of all comes from her current owner, who, despite knowing the rumors surrounding the doll, decided to go ahead and bring her into their home. At least they had the knowledge to store her inside a glass case. Except now, every night when it's dark and quiet, Amanda can be heard trying to scratch her way out of the glass. Where does she want to go exactly? Well, they have no idea, but let's just hope they don't open up that case to find out. Coming in at number 6 is Mandy. Back in 1991, the Quesnel District Museum received an anonymous donation in the form of a doll, which, I mean, from what I have learned, is never a good start. The donor informed them that she could no longer handle living with the doll due to her constant crying and relentless ability to move objects or even make them disappear, and that essentially she was just way too creeped out and starting to fear that her life was in danger. Allegedly, the museum contacted a psychic to see if the information they got from the donor was true, and as it turns out, it was. The psychic advised the museum to get rid of the doll not to keep it, but they went against their advice and included it in their exhibit anyways. Soon, Mandy began haunting the halls of the museum. Visitors claimed to hear disembodied footsteps, the sound of tapping glass, and some even swear they witnessed her face change and her eyes blink. Even creepier is that when the museum decided to place Mandy alongside other dolls in the same case, the next day all the other dolls were either damaged or found tossed onto the floor in front of the case. They let her be alone after that. Just beware if you do decide to visit her, as allegedly anytime someone has tried to photograph her, their camera breaks. Coming in at number 5 is an island of dolls. One doll is enough to creep me out, but did you know that there is actually an island of dolls? Oh yes, you heard that right. It's quite literally the thing of nightmares. Located in Mexico, this island has a reputation for being one of the most haunted places in the world. And while that description often gets thrown around, to be honest, I kinda believe it with this one. I mean, it's an island of dolls. It makes perfect sense to me. Legend has it that a young girl died from drowning here, and when a man named Julian Barrera moved to the island, he found he was being tormented by the girl's restless spirit. In an attempt to please her, he began hanging dolls across the island. But it seems the dolls weren't enough to please the spirit, as she managed to rope Julian into convincing his nephew that she needed a friend to join her in the afterlife. The poor nephew's body was found in a nearby canal at the very same spot where the girl had died years prior. It's said that all the dolls that remain are alive, likely haunted by the spirits of the ones who lost their lives here. Some say that their eyes move and watch them as they walk across it, but even creepier is the claim that it's not just their eyes but also their hands that move. Plus, apparently the dolls are known to laugh and whisper behind your back as you walk past. To summarize, this will not be my next tourist destination. Coming in at number 4 is Mercy. So maybe it's just me, but the fact that Mercy is one of the cuter haunted dolls I have ever seen almost makes me more afraid of her. Kind of like a cute tiny little creature that lowers your guard with its giant beanie baby eyes so that you get close enough for it to kill you with its lethal venom. Anyways, the story with Mercy is that the current owner purchased Mercy off of eBay, and as we know, that almost never goes well. When she was buying her, it was said Mercy was haunted by the spirit of a young girl, but according to the owner, that couldn't be further from the truth. Don't get it twisted, the doll's for sure haunted, but the owner is certain it's something much worse, something evil, maybe even demonic. As soon as Mercy was brought into her home, weird things started happening. The owner felt immediately uneasy around the doll and knew that something bad was living inside of it. Then, just a few days later, she noticed that radio stations began changing if Mercy was near them. But creepiest of all was when she caught the doll standing on both feet in the middle of the room after she had been stored away in a chest. I mean, can you imagine walking in on that? I honestly might move. I know that sounds dramatic, but that house belongs to the demon inside the doll now. I may as well just get out alive while I still can. Coming in at number 3 is Harold. Haunted dolls are a pretty huge thing on the internet, I have come to understand. Personally, I have a hard time understanding why you would want to bring a possessed doll into your home, but hey, to each their own, right? Apparently the whole sensation of it all started back in 2003 with a haunted doll named Harold. Now, what's weird about this one is that allegedly after the new owner, Anthony, acquired the doll, the lister on eBay came forward admitting that it was all a hoax and that Harold wasn't actually haunted. But Anthony would beg to differ. Apparently, as soon as the doll arrived, strange things began happening. There were swarms of flies surrounding his attic, objects moving all around, and his dog even died, completely out of the blue. He even asked his vet. There were no answers, no illnesses, no physical abnormalities, nothing. The dog just dropped dead. That's when Anthony really got frightened. Eventually, he has come to believe that there are 5 different entities living inside of Harold, one of which seems to be the malevolent leader, while the others are being held hostage by the more powerful evil force. Anthony claims he is constantly worried for his life, but the doll continues to live with him as he is unable to make it leave, and he feels it is his duty to figure out how to get the entities out of Harold once and for all. And seriously, save yourself and don't Google him. People that have reported feeling ill or even vomiting up blood after seeing his photo. In that breath, I really hope that doesn't happen to me. Coming in at number 2, Letta. So there are regular creepy porcelain or rag dolls, and then there are marionette dolls, which to me just add a whole other level of terrifying. And the most famous of these is the truly haunting Letta. Her owner Carrie says in his hometown there was an abandoned house that everyone believed was haunted. When he got older, he decided to visit his hometown and check it out for himself if the old house really was scary after all. When he got inside, he found his old historic marionette doll that had been hidden underneath some floorboards, and intrigued, Carrie decided to plop her into the car and take her home. On the drive home, he says the doll spoke to him crying out, "Letta me out," which he decided would be the perfect name, and so Letta was born. Once he brought her home, the people in his life warned him that they felt very uncomfortable around the doll and that they didn't trust it. But still, he decided to keep her. To this day, he still has her. He has even gone on to TV shows with the doll for interviews. Still, make no mistake, this doll is scary. Carrie himself admits things got strange very soon after he brought her home. Scuff marks were appearing on the floor, items were moving, and his little ones would complain about her being in their nightmares. In fact, one night they said they woke up to Letta talking and moving around all on her own. At one point, Carrie tried to sell the cursed doll, but as he tells it, he physically could not move her out of the car. So, moral of the story, maybe don't bring home a creepy doll you found under the floor in an old abandoned haunted house from your childhood. Yeah, do we all agree there? And last up in our #1 spot today, the Susie doll. As the story goes, in 1983, Susie was given to a young girl named Heather Platt as a birthday present from her aunt Robin. The creepy doll was rough around the edges as she was homemade, but still Heather loved it. But that night, things took a dark turn when Heather's parents were woken up by the sound of growling and saw a dark shadow walk down the street and enter their home. From that day forward, the doll was never the same. Susie began moving things around the house and was often found in completely different spots than where she had last been placed. Things got creepier when they would find Heather sitting with Susie watching TV static in what appeared to be a trance. Next thing they knew, things turned violent as the family would wake up with perfect circles of their hair missing at the back, and medical tests proved that it had been pulled out. But of course, none of them had done anything. Susie began moving freely at a more frequent and alarming rate, never moving while she was being watched, but could change rooms at a moment's notice. Fast enough that by the time you turned around, she could literally be right in front of you. Then after the father was attacked in the middle of the night by the demonic doll, they knew they had to get an expert. In came Lorraine Warren, who took one look at this whole situation and told them to seek out an exorcist immediately. Thankfully, the ritual was complete and the family decided to throw away the doll for good, and according to what I read, the family has never let another doll in their house ever again.
#10, Eloise. Alright, first up on this list we have Eloise, because she's the one I saw while doing a separate video that made me realize I had to do a full top 10 about this haunted eBay doll market. She is apparently haunted by a succubus, which are known for enticing men. She is reportedly capable of invading your dreams and psychically communicating with you. It's said you will have visions of a very attractive woman that matches your desires and she will try to seduce you. Doesn't really sound all that bad, right? Well, apparently you're gonna become so attached to the doll and woman to the point of being obsessed with it. The description says, with long enough exposure you will find yourself daydreaming about it every waking moment. It will enslave your mind and soul if you let it. The doll is recommended for anyone who is no longer interested in trying to pursue women who don't want them, saying that you should not buy it if you have a wife and family, because you will apparently no longer care about them, only the succubus. #9, Dawn. This doll was purchased by 2 paranormal investigators when they were contacted by a family who had originally bought the doll for their daughter at a garage sale. The doll had apparently started to talk to their daughter and she would wake up every night crying, them deciding they should probably get rid of it. Since owning the doll, the paranormal investigators had apparently run a variety of tests and learned that the spirit was apparently very dark and malicious. When they were communicating with it, they say they saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room and felt cold gusts of wind hitting their bodies. One of them got an intense pain in their head and it apparently hurt to try and open their eyes. When they were done and they finally
finally were able to open them, it revealed a red spot where she appeared to be bleeding from her eye. It also apparently has the power to make you feel sick and mess with your electronics. Why you would want to buy this, I don't know. Number 8. Kneeling Boy. This one was purchased from a local estate sale by someone who was just looking to collect dolls, not knowing that the figure was haunted. They started noticing dark shadows in their home, glasses breaking in their hands, things being knocked off tables, and experiencing incredibly bad luck. So they handed them off to the current seller who is familiar with the paranormal. They noticed that their dog was cautious around the room the doll was kept in, and one day noticed their dog was struggling to breathe, and they saw that their collar had somehow been tightened all the way. The next person to go near the doll was their daughter, who started to feel a burning sensation on her arm, and it revealed a deep bleeding scratch. Over the next day, the energy in the house felt angry and tense, and they noticed the strong smell of rotten eggs or sulfur, which is a common sign that demons are around. They are selling it with the hopes that the spirit is not completely evil, but just doesn't want to be around them specifically. Number 7. Renee. This doll was purchased from an online auction and was originally found in a church donation box. The people there having no idea where it came from, as it just seemed to appear one day. When they brought it into their home, their pets were immediately wary of it and avoided any room that the doll was in. They also noticed that whenever they left it alone, all the other dolls they owned would be found fallen over or even smashed. When they attempted to communicate with the doll through a spirit box, all their phones started flashing off and on, and one even died despite being at a full charge. When they asked it questions, all they got in response were deep growling sounds. But when they asked if it was a good or evil spirit, it responded with darkness, probably not good. During the communication, they could hear their dogs crying and whimpering from where they had hidden themselves away upstairs. Number 6. Monica. This doll came from a group of 4 dolls that were all owned by an elderly woman. She would apparently call the dolls her friends and handmade the clothes for them and would have full conversations with them every day. When she passed away, the dolls ended up in new hands. Throughout the night that they brought Monica home, they apparently started having severe headaches and upset stomachs. And when they tried to sleep, they had strange dreams and were woken up constantly. Their cats also apparently being incredibly fearful of the doll. Many people think that cats are able to sense things that we can't. When they communicated with the doll, they asked if she had been causing the headaches and other symptoms, and she spoke through the spirit box saying, "I have." During this, on camera, they saw a shadowy figure run across the room, and at the same time an orb appeared to come out of the doll. They believe that Monica is confused and having a hard time adjusting to the fact that she's dead. Number 5. Twins. These 2 matching dolls are apparently not haunted by a human spirit, but instead something entirely different. When the 2 are together, it will apparently inhabit both of them, but when apart, it will become confused and jump between the 2. The seller has claimed to communicate with it through both a Ouija board and a pendulum. The entity apparently will answer in a mix of words and gibberish, but when asked what it was, it responded with Satan and the devil. It doesn't seem to be overly active, as they don't describe much about what the entity is capable of, just saying that they have seen dark shadows and orbs around the doll and will apparently hear a strange sound that is similar to gurgling water. They note in the description that a spirit will choose its keeper, and if you feel inexplicably drawn to it, then you are lucky, but be careful as you may not be able to handle it. Number 4. Cuddles. This video has already been bad enough if you're scared of dolls, and I'm about to make it even worse if you're scared of clowns too. This totally friendly and absolutely not terrifying little guy is called Cuddles. Apparently he's not actually an evil spirit and is more just a goofy little guy who wants to play tricks on you. He will apparently flicker lights on and off and play other pranks, though the seller doesn't specify what else he'll do, saying that's up to the new owner to find out. They can apparently often see mists, auras, and orbs around him when they take photos, and will hear footsteps coming from the room he's kept in. I guess he's just walking around and doing a little clown dance or something. At the end of the description, they quickly tack on the fact that they will occasionally hear a spooky evil laugh, but then go on to say he's just a fun little guy to have in your home. So you're definitely taking a risk on this one. Number 3. Faye. This doll was originally purchased at an estate estate sale where she was apparently owned by the family's mother. When they would visit, they would report hearing full-on conversations coming from their mother's room, but only her and the dolls would be inside. Apparently, they would also occasionally see the doll's facial expression change right before their eyes. When they brought the doll home, they would hear movement coming from the room she was in, and it seemed to be able to mess with their electronics, setting off their phones. When they communicated with the doll through a spirit box, it apparently said that it wanted to fight with them, followed by a growling sound. As they were packing everything up, the spirit box set off with the word Hain, and they heard footsteps in the room and also saw a figure on their camera. It apparently carries a heavy negative energy, and they keep it locked outside in their shed. Number 2. Chloe. Despite looking the most fearsome, Chloe is the only one on this list to be inhabited by an apparently totally friendly and nice spirit. She was reportedly owned by the seller's aunt, who had a large collection of haunted dolls. She doesn't know the full story of the doll or the spirit and just has a brief description that was left behind by her aunt. It says that she was a young, beautiful girl that was alive in the late 1800s or early 1900s. The doll apparently brings peace and a positive energy into the home with a kind presence. She's also apparently known to make small movements and occasionally speak in a whispering voice. During her mortal life, she was apparently a girl who had a very traumatic death and her body was never found. She will also reportedly make you have very positive and pleasant dreams. I'm sure you're a nice girl and all, Chloe, but your face is just a little terrifying. Number 1. Cora. This is another doll that was found at an estate sale and was listed as being evil. The family had apparently never even known that they owned the doll. They found it when cleaning out their mom's belongings, where it was hidden under old blankets and appeared to be wrapped in an altar cloth from their church. It apparently exuded a dark energy, and they remembered their mom often talking about dark forces being on Earth. When they started attempting to communicate with the doll, its eyes would apparently appear to move and look at different people in the room. Over the spirit box, it said it hated them and wanted to hurt them. As it said this, one of them felt a burning sensation on their back, and they saw deep red scratches that seemed to appear before their eyes. When asked if the doll had ill intent, it said the end is near. When they removed the doll from the home, the negative energy and feeling inside apparently lasted for days afterwards.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Cursed Shadow Lady doll. This doll was actually sent to a woman named Denise Alvarado. She's a well-known author, but also expert in voodoo, magic, and spirituality. Over the years, she has been sent a number of dolls believed to be cursed or possessed. This doll being one of them. According to the lady who sent her the doll, she randomly found it on her bed one day. It creeped her out, so she took it to Denise. And guess what? Underneath the doll's mossy hair, they found pins in the head. Turns out that the lady had been suffering from terrible migraines ever since that doll came to her. Don't worry though, folks, Denise managed to neutralize the doll, and now it's in display in the Cursed Voodoo Doll section of the Voodoo Doll Museum in New Orleans. Still, I am staying as far away from that doll as possible. In our 9th spot today, we have the Vengeful Voodoo Doll, and if you like this video so far and you want to see more like it, then smash that like button. Obviously, subscribe to our channel. So take a look at this doll right here. I am terrified. First off, what happened to its face? Honestly, maybe I don't even want to know, to be honest. The damn doll looks like its face is rotting off of its body. Or its face was like smashed with some mashed potatoes. Honestly, it kind of looks like that. Either way, it looks horrifying. Now, this voodoo doll apparently contains the spirit of an escaped corpse that is out for revenge. And it apparently contains some strong, dark energy. Again, what the actual hell is up with its face? I think I just got cursed from looking at that. In our 8th spot today, we have Robert the Doll. Surely we have talked about this doll a lot on this channel, but I swear, this doll and Annabelle are probably the most haunted dolls out there. So Robert the Doll was once owned by a man named Robert Eugene Otto. It was given to him in 1906 when he was just a little boy. He then went on to name the doll after himself and even dress the doll like himself. But don't be fooled by its cute little sailor outfit, okay? This doll is so powerful that it can kill you. So according to the story, a servant of the family performed voodoo magic on it and cursed it.
whereas others believe that Robert, the human, not the doll, was so attached to the doll and spilled so much of himself into the doll that it just eventually came to life. But like I said, this doll is anything but friendly. He has caused a number of car accidents, broken bones, injuries, and illnesses. He's now displayed in Key West in the Fort East Martello Museum. A big sign guards the box saying, "Do not photograph this doll." Because if you do this without asking Robert's permission, then apparently he'll make you suffer. Honestly, it's not even worth going to the museum and seeing Robert, because all you need is to accidentally trip and then fall into the case or piss him off and boom, he's coming for you with his evil voodoo powers. In our 7th spot today we have the Attack Doll. Fun fact, a number of people who have visited New Orleans have bought a voodoo doll as a souvenir, and in the end have found out that it was cursed and it plagued them with bad luck. So I'd say maybe just stick to fridge magnets and keychains as souvenirs. Well, this next Texan woman decided to buy one of these voodoo dolls on eBay, and oh boy did it go wrong for her fast. So she took it out of its casing, and that's when scary things started happening around her home. For example, she would hear weird noises in the middle of the night like something was scurrying around her house. She also would wake up to the doll being in a different place than it was the night before. Things got really bad when the doll started physically attacking her. She would wake up to scratches and gashes all over her body. That's when she had enough and decided to send the doll back to the person that she had bought it from. But the package with the doll was sent back to her. It said return to sender and also said resident deceased. Okay, so either the ghost of the resident sent the doll to her or the doll literally killed its previous owner. Both are terrifying scenarios. Coming in at number 6 we have the Warrens voodoo doll. So we all know that the Warrens like to collect haunted or cursed items. Well, one thing they had in their little museum of horrors were a pair of voodoo dolls they called the Two Deaf Dolls, given the name because they are earless. Now these dolls are terrifying looking. One of them has a noose around its neck, and the other doesn't have any eyes or a mouth, so it looks like it's staring into your soul or sucking the life out of you. So these dolls are said to attack individuals and make them sick until they die. It started off when a doll collector stumbled upon them. Apparently her son became incredibly sick because of these dolls and almost died. When she suspected that the dolls were causing his illness, she reached out to the Warrens. The doll was then taken to the museum and the boy immediately got better. They were literally feeding off of his soul. Here's something even more terrifying. So the Warrens kept the dolls on display, but obviously had warning signs telling people not to touch them. Well, one day 2 visitors at the museum took the dolls and were fooling around with them. That night the Warrens woke up in the middle of the night from a noise coming from the basement. When they went down there to investigate, they saw several haunted dolls in a circle on the ground with those 2 voodoo dolls in the middle of the circle. Not only that, the visitor said that night he got in a horrible accident and almost lost his life. When it happened, he swore he saw the 2 dolls just staring and laughing at him. See, this is one of the many reasons why you don't fool around with cursed items, folks. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the human skin and teeth doll. What's scarier than a normal voodoo doll? A voodoo doll made out of human hair and teeth. Just last year, a man named Bruce Robertson was out walking on a beach in Florida when he came across something quite odd that washed up on shore. Upon further inspection, he noticed it was a voodoo doll made out of coconuts and human teeth. When he later got it analyzed, it was discovered it was also covered in human skin. Horrified, he tossed it back into the ocean. Apparently people that witnessed him finding this doll told him that the doll was sent to curse the land and those that enter the ocean. But others believe it promotes good luck, and it was created to represent an African spider god. So who knows, what should we think? Maybe it is meant to be good luck. But a lot of people don't think that this is the case and believe it should have been burned rather than tossed back into the ocean. Moving on to number 4, we have Joliet. I honestly am surprised that I've never heard of this doll before because her story is terrifying. Basically, Joliet is a highly dangerous and possessed doll that has been passed down from generation to generation to expecting mothers in their family. What's weird is that every mom-to-be that has gotten this doll has always had 2 children. It's always been one boy and one girl. But sadly, the boys never lived too long. They pass away after being only 3 days old. They believe that there is some voodoo curse latched onto this doll. So they blame the doll for the deaths of their sons, and say that the souls of the boys are now trapped inside of her. According to the doll's current owner, Anna, she has heard sounds of children's laughter and crying coming from the doll. This doll will continue to claim the male heirs of this family until someone puts an end to it. I'm just glad that I'm not part of that family, just saying. In our third spot today, we have the haunted zombie doll. Can we all just agree to not buy cursed or haunted items off of eBay? Like, please? You will get cursed, which is self-explanatory, like you're buying a cursed item. What do you think's gonna happen? Anyways, I say this because this next woman bought an extremely cursed voodoo doll off of eBay. The doll was called the Haunted Zombie Doll and was labeled as very active and almost alive. That right there is a red flag, my friends. It also came with specific care instructions. It was to always be locked away in its silver viewing box. So if you're gonna be dumb enough to buy the doll, at least be smart enough to follow its instructions. But of course, that wasn't the case, and the girl took it out of its box. And guess what? The doll started to attack her. Every night she would wake up with a new scratch or mark on her body. She then locked the doll back in its box and put it in her basement. But that didn't stop it. The doll would haunt her in her dreams, and sometimes she could hear evil laughs and giggles coming from the doll. Here's the scariest part. When she decided she had enough of the doll, she resold it on eBay. But the thing literally ended up back on her doorstep. This happened not only once, but twice. Every time she got rid of the doll, it would somehow end back in her house. It literally latched onto her. That's what you get for not following the instructions, just saying. In our second spot, we have the Downward Spiral Death Curse Doll. Here's another terrifying doll that is available to buy on eBay. It's called the Downward Spiral Death Curse Doll, sends justice to liars, cheaters, wronged you. According to the seller, it is an authentic voodoo doll and should be taken seriously. Now, let's see what it says the doll can do. For starters, it can enact revenge on someone that did you wrong. Second, it is so powerful that it can ruin any of their relationships. Next, it states it can bring a person pain and suffering. And it says, and I quote, "Rain deserving justice down upon the rat that did you wrong, and give them the justice you need. Watch them fall apart right before your very eyes." Well, that's freaking dark. I'm sold. Just kidding. But wow, that is insane. Again, this eBay listing is filled with warnings saying it shouldn't be taken as a joke and only serious individuals should buy it. And of course, it says it uses real voodoo magic, so if you're afraid of the supernatural or scared of real magic, then you should not purchase this doll. Or how about we just stop making and selling voodoo dolls? That would be great. And in our number one spot today, we have the Karma Pain Voodoo Doll. This next doll was posted by the same seller as the previous one, except this doll is listed as the Business Curse Voodoo Doll Safe Send Justice Karma Pain to Deserving Revenge. Basically, it claims it can ruin someone's success, prosperity, and goals in their life and business. If you use this doll, it will cause your enemy to experience suffering, anguish, mental torture, extreme paranoia, and physical pain. It also will plague their mind with terrifying nightmares. Also, apparently with this one, it's so powerful that once it's put into motion, it's very difficult to stop. So again, it should not be taken as a joke. Now, let's take a look at the reviews this doll has. Clients have said they have witnessed some paranormal things while using this doll. Lights have been said to flicker, sometimes the doll disappears and then reappears on its own, and others have witnessed strange visions when being around the doll. So yeah, no thank you.
Starting us off at number 10 is Sophia. Why is it that the antique looking dolls are always the cursed ones? People are always like, oh ye of little faith, like no I have little faith, look at what the days of yore gave us. Nothing but societal issues and cursed porcelain dolls. Now the doll was given to a girl by her grandfather. She has a white and brown dress on with a big brown bow on her neck and a brown olden looking hat. At least have some colour in your outfit, jeez. Anyways, things took a turn for the worse when the girl's granddad died because the doll would start whispering dream with me and giggle. Apparently that was a phrase the granddad used to say to her before reading her bedtime stories. The girl's parents heard it too and really wanted to give the doll away, but they suspiciously died in a car accident right before they were going to. Was that Sophia's doing? Because if so, she has massive reach and I am terrified. After the parents' death, the doll went from whispering "dream with me" to "die with me," and that was the end of that. Coming in at number 9 is Mandy. So Mandy is this porcelain baby doll that wears a white outfit and bonnet. Her face is proper murked though, since it's cracked up and not very well kept. Mandy is currently stored in a glass box in a Canadian museum, and she's apparently so dangerous you can't take her out of the box without smashing it. The previous owner gave it to the museum after realizing Mandy was beyond screwed up. She would keep the doll in her basement and would always hear the cries of a baby from down there. The guy who takes care of the museum claimed he can hear dainty footsteps coming from her room when no one's in there. Customers have also reported seeing her blink and follow them with her eyes. But I feel like with any doll, it always follows you with its eyes. Does anyone else feel that way? Is it just me? At number 8 we have Susie. So this doll's case file was under Ed and Lorraine Warren, so you know some spooky supernatural shit is about to go down. Heather Platt was given the doll by her aunt who actually made it, and I don't know why she would make something so bloody terrifying. Her static smile looks like the ones off the Night of the Living Dummy Goosebumps books, like you guys know what I mean. Like, hello, no. The first night Susie spent in the house, her parents saw this black figure walking towards their house and heard growling from the inside. Over the next few weeks they realized Susie moved on her own accord and would move objects that were way heavier than she was. She was also outright dangerous and would pull the kids' hair and ended up needing to be exorcised by a priest for it to leave their house for good. Filling at number 7 slot is The Purchase. This one's from redditor KK Holiday 07, who said their college roommate's sister decided to buy a haunted doll off the internet because the owner was desperate to get rid of it. The girl was fully aware that it could be a complete prank, and she herself was a major skeptic when it came to things like this, so when reality set in and it was so much different than what she expected, she was shooketh. As soon as she got the doll, things at her house went haywire. She started having intense violent nightmares every night, her dog started throwing up blood despite the vet saying he was completely fine. I mean, leave the dog out for God's sake. The girl started hearing voices that would tell her to harm herself, and she actually ended up being admitted into a mental institution and is still very much there 8 years later. As for the doll, she's probably hopefully rotting in hell. Now at number 6 is the voodoo doll. Does the fact voodoo is in the name of the doll not give you a clue that maybe you shouldn't buy it? Seems like common sense to me, but clearly not. The rag doll that looks like it's been burnt and tortured at least 14 times was bought on eBay by some random woman. When it finally arrived, it was in a silver box and the instructions online said do not open the box and let the doll out under any circumstances. But the woman did it anyway. Honestly, if you're gonna buy a voodoo doll, I'm already gonna question your sanity and intelligence, so I was not surprised when she opened the box, like, okay, great, you're still dumb. Now the doll started appearing in the woman's dreams and actually attacked her during the night a few times, so she was like, screw this, I'm gonna sell you. And she did successfully and multiple times, but each time she sold it, it would somehow appear back in her house. I'm sure by now the woman's abandoned the doll in some landfill under tons of garbage, but the doll probably made it back into her bed somehow. You know how they be. Coming in at number 5 is Alice. So Alice got passed down from generation to generation, but initially belonged to the grandmother of the girl who has it now. Again, she's porcelain white, blue eyes, brown hair, blush that covers her entire cheek and jaw surface area for some weird reason, and this Mona Lisa smile where you don't know whether she's smiling at you or plotting your demise. Rumor has it when the grandma was young, one of her good friends passed away and her spirit is now stuck inside of Alice. EVP recordings have picked up the doll saying, I want to be left alone to suffer. So I mean, technically she just wants to be alone and not hurt anyone, but just in case she's locked away on some shelf somewhere, so all's well that ends well, I guess. At number 4 is Elmo. I feel like Elmo toys are so popular, obviously because of how popular Sesame Street is. I don't think I've ever walked into a Toys R Us without seeing some sort of Elmo toy somewhere. Never actually had one myself though. I do have Sesame Street pajamas, Elmo focused though. Those are nice and comfortable. Either way, the Bowmans decided to buy a talking Elmo doll back in 2008 for their 2-year-old son James. The doll was programmed to say the child's name and 2 other phrases but nothing else. But after the family changed its batteries, the doll started ad-libbing other words like "kill James," which I don't even know how the doll would be able to say unless it was A, programmed into him, or B, he was just possessed. And imagine hearing that in Elmo's sing-songy voice like, "No." And they got rid of it ASAP Rocky, so good for them. Filling at number 3 slot is Poopa. This doll probably moves the most out of any of the ones on the list, and that is something that just does not sit well with me. Poopa is interesting because she was made to look like an exact replica of the girl who owned her, so she has blue eyes, curly blonde hair, and she's wearing a matching blue hat, dress, and bow. She's one of the cutest dolls on this list actually, if not the cutest, but according to the family that she lived with, she would change her expression and move her arms on multiple occasions. She's stored in a glass box, and whenever she's in a bit of a mood, a bit of a tantrum, she'll start tapping on the glass, and when someone comes to give her attention, they find her hands on the glass. Poopa is honestly chaotic and mischievous. She's tried to escape countless times, but to no avail, so it's like, girl, stop trying. I'm guessing she has the spirit of the girl who owned her inside of her. That would make sense. Now at number 2 is Caroline. The doll's owner had a very tragic history. Both the girl's mother and grandma were burned at the stake for being witches, so this doll is really all the girl had for company and female love. Looks wise, it's this very porcelain white doll with red curly hair, blue eyes, big old red cheeks, and those 20s, like line eyebrows that look like trash. Now the girl lived her life, she got older, and tragically passed away while giving birth to her child. The doll then found itself in this other man's collection, but after a few months of having it, he decided to give it away as well. People in his family had mysteriously started dying ever since he acquired the doll, so it was like, well, it's clear to see what the cause is. No it's gonna cause people to die. It's haunted by the spirit of the girl, her mum, her grandma. It's like the thing is collecting souls. And finally, at number 1 is Kasia. The story of this doll is truly horrific and originates in Russia. One of the Tsar's concubines was pregnant and very much hoping for a son. When she gave birth though, not only was it a girl, the girl was also deformed, so they burned her alive. The mother then mixed the ashes with pottery clay and made it into a doll, which is really messed up. If you didn't want the girl to begin with, why keep her ashes and make her into something inanimate? The doll itself is extremely creepy. The face is one proper eye and one glassy faded over one. Her face is cracking to reveal the yellow clay underneath, and of course she's made with a baby's ashes. Katia is under strict surveillance because her curse is actually very dangerous. If you look at her face for more than 20 seconds and she winks at you, then you may as well just say your goodbyes. Something bad will happen to you since she left her mark on you, and all you can do is just wait for it, really.
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have the Doll of the Devil. This is the name being given to the creepy doll that caused a stir on the internet in 2018. Footage of a vampire doll that follows you with its eyes went viral after the demon doll appeared on an unmarked tombstone in Mexico. You know what? I don't like the sound of this. Oh, but it gets even worse. The doll was found with a baby bottle of blood next to it. I'm not even sure if this is the original video, but footage uploaded to YouTube by RM Videos shares the creepy doll, and it's had over 330,000 views. Look how its eyes really bore into your soul. Who watching this video would touch that doll? Yeah, rather you than me, mate. Coming in at number 9, we have Mandy. Mandy is one of the more notorious haunted dolls. I'm actually pretty creeped out just looking at her, to be honest. It's all about her cracked face, her knitted bonnet, and that creepy little lamb. They're enough for me to basically want nothing to do with her, but as I'm here hosting a top 10 video, I kind of have to give you the story. Sucks to be me. Alright. So, Mandy is said to date back to the 1920s and is thought to have come from Germany. Somehow, she travelled all the way to Canada, and in 1991 she was donated to a museum in British Columbia. Why was she given to a museum? Well, her previous owner thought that she was possessed. She said she would wake up at night to hear a baby crying and that the windows in her home would miraculously open. After she gave away the doll, the crying and the window opening stopped, but strange things started happening in the museum. Workers also heard crying, and weirdly some staff members would find their lunch had disappeared. I'm sorry, but ain't nobody messing with my lunch. In one truly terrifying turn of events, that little toy lamb was found outside of Mandy's case. How'd it get there? Well, paranormal investigators say that Mandy is possessed by the spirit of a child, but but she isn't actually a menace, just playful. Nonetheless, I think I would keep my hands off her. Coming in at number 8, we have the Wedding Scratcher. Like, I already don't feel super great about a porcelain doll dressed as a bride. It kind of combines all of my fears of corpse brides, Miss Havisham, and spooky haunted dolls, making it a bit of a trio of doom. Speaking of doom, this bride doll bought it in bounds for a family who bought the doll for £5 in a charity shop in the United Kingdom. 50-year-old Debbie Merrick brought the China doll, but then she got way more than she bargained for. It started bringing chaos and misfortune into her home. She placed the doll on display in the spare room, but since the doll moved in, her husband began waking up with scratches all over his legs. He also had started having dreams that the doll dragged him across the floor. Debbie has also been having nightmares about the doll and says that since she came to be in their home, their smoke alarm frequently goes off. In the end, she decided, you know what, I'm just putting that doll up for sale. Good riddance. Another doll you should never look at is Peggy. Peggy will make you sick, and she is coming into number 4. So Peggy is a haunted doll residing in the UK in Shrewsbury, Shropshire to be precise. Peggy is owned by paranormal investigator Jane Harris, who runs an organisation called Haunted Dolls. That's what it says on the tin. Really. She was given Peggy by a terrified woman who couldn't cope with the burden of the doll. Peggy is thought to have the power to visit people in their dreams, warning them or haunting them. Mediums who have worked with Peggy believe that she is linked to the Holocaust, and Jane believes that she died of respiratory issues, possibly a gassing. In 2015, Peggy caused a media stir when an article was published about her on the Mail Online, after which 80 readers reported having an awful experience after viewing her picture. Most were nausea, but some people even had panic attacks. Peggy is said to be haunted by an evil spirit. Now Jane, her owner, did ask the doll to stop tormenting people, but apparently one woman even had a heart attack shortly after meeting her. Yikes. We have Snack Time Cabbage Patch Kid at number 2. Now these were the true menaces of the 1990s. Sure, they might not be haunted or possessed by a demon, but these dolls were the real demon here. Why? Well, because they tried to eat the kids they belonged to. So the story goes that these dolls were released in 1996, and they were designed to make the doll look like they could eat. Plastic fries and various other fake foods were included, and kids could feed them and the doll would chew them. Sounds great, but unfortunately the doll couldn't tell the difference between a plastic fry and a kid's finger, and you know how much children love sticking their fingers in stuff. There were several complaints from parents of children with injured fingers. Kids would obviously stick their fingers in the doll's mouth. The doll would bite down, clamping so hard the kids couldn't always get their fingers out. There were a number of reports in the mid-90s of kids getting their fingers and other body parts stuck in the mouth of the devil dolls, and one girl even got an unwelcome haircut when the doll mulched up a significant proportion of her hair. Over 100 complaints were received, so the doll was recalled and $40 refunds were offered. To be honest, I'd rather have my finger than $40.